Great to have you. I'm literally going through your books as I know them and just trying to give them a little outline. But
I bet that was fun.
yeah, no, it wasn't. It's generally fun. It's a little bit of a fanboy moment. But before we do that, I'm going to say welcome, Molly Potter. For me, you are sideways, so I mean, I have to do this to join you. But hey,
Yes. And you're sideways for me. Hang on, let me see if I can sort that out. Is that better? There we go.
Sideways is better than at all. Molly Potter, pleasure to have you on our Instagram Live. How are you?
I'm grand, thank you. Finally, now I've arrived. I don't know what was going on there. I was pressing every button. I don't trust technology sometimes. It's always magic when it does work, isn't it? So
always. When Jenny, my co-founder, and I did our my first 5 years live, I kept saying to her, it's dead easy, you just press the button. 7 minutes she had to fill while I was literally sitting pressing the button and it wouldn't let me on. Anyway, so I've just been chatting to everybody about the fact that you are an author, amongst other things, practitioner, teacher, trainer. And that I came across your books, first of all, by working in settings that were using them and raving about them. And I was saying that, the content is great. We'll expand on that a little bit more and why they are unique and why I really love them so much. But also, when you pick up a Molly Potter book, you know it's a Molly Potter book because Sarah's illustrations are just
fantastic.
Yeah, and they are very different to anything else that's out there, so you know you're going to see it. And I think what I like about that as well is that as a reader, as an adult reader, you can really enjoy the illustrations as well as children really kind of loving them as well. So for anybody that isn't familiar with your work, literally where have you been? But could you just start by giving us a little bit of who you are and how you got to be a children's author?
Okay, so it was a bit of a funny journey. I started off in mainstream teaching, and then I did 7 years in a role where I was supporting, I live in Norfolk, I live in Norwich. I was a county-wide advisor for personal social health education, and that started me, so I was always, as a teacher, I always loved teaching PSHE more than any other subject, and that started me on a journey of being absolutely fascinated, particularly with the sort of emotional self-awareness, those aspects, relationship aspects of the curriculum. I then left that job to take on a job in a pupil referral unit with children who struggle to manage their emotions and behaviour, and that accelerated my interest in that component of, well, life basically. And I had written books on things like, for teachers, on creative thinking, sex and relationships education, PSHE, and so on. And then it was actually my publisher suggested that I move, and I'm so glad she did, I move into the realm of picture books. So in other words, taking my PSHE and passion for emotional literacy and putting it into picture books for children. And thus the series has evolved and emerged, in fact. So starting with, and I've got my books here, this book that I had no idea it would be the hit that it was, but it just took off massively. And it's such a simple book. It literally is just about identifying what you're feeling, and then it gives you suggestions for what you might want to do, when you're feeling that particular emotion.
Yeah, I was just saying before you popped on, it's about, for me, the strategy aspect of it as well. So there's kind of a story to it. I can recognize myself in that often, because what I was saying was children often can really struggle to articulate an emotion, a behavior, because doesn't make sense always, especially if it's what adults perceive to be a negative behavior. That usually comes from a place where I haven't got the ability to reason, so therefore I am now in a state of unreasonableness. But don't ask me why I've done that, or don't ask me what it was for, because I just don't know.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, go on, sorry.
I was going to say, it's a lovely opportunity through reading, which is usually a collaborative thing that you can share, and you're usually quite close when you're doing that. So if a child has displayed behaviour that adults find inappropriate, in terms of the reparation bit, which is really important to let children know that that's okay, that we all have these moments, but we can make it better. That kind of sitting together and reading is a lovely action to do. But when you're then being able to recognize yourself in somebody else, a character in a book, it gives you one step away from it being me. And therefore that, in my experience, opens up loads of opportunities for children to maybe recognize a bit of how they're feeling and articulate it a bit better.
And well, that's where the illustrations also, like you say, the illustrations are wonderful because children can identify the very typical situations that have been illustrated throughout the book. So not just by the text, I think there can be as much sort of milking of opportunity to start up discussion about emotions through the pictures as much as the text. And really all that book's aiming to do is put a focus on emotions, which quite often in our very over-logical society, emotions get sort of suppressed or ignored, or certainly not acknowledged as much as I think they should be, because they have a really powerful impact on us. So the idea is that even just by having a tool that says, what are you feeling? It's bringing that focus into our emotions. And the idea is that all emotions are acceptable. As you just said, quite often a load of baggage. So if our child, or if us as a child was angry and our parents then judged us, or, you know, an adult in our life judged us for being angry, then we're not just getting on and being angry. We've now got a whole load of guilt on top of feeling angry. And it might actually be a affront to our whole self-worth, because I'm being angry and I'm bad because I'm being angry. So healthy emotions, we acknowledge them, they're all acceptable. And the point is, we have a choice about what we do when we feel an emotion. And that's where we get clever with emotions. So a young child, like you just said, can't really, you know, regulate and manage them. They've only got the ability to have a tantrum, to say, I'm really unhappy. I don't know what to do about it. But as a child gets older, they can start to recognize, oh, I'm feeling something. It's taken me over. But I do, eventually they can work out, I have a choice about what I do. I can make the situation far worse, or I can get a bit more clever about it and do something that won't make the situation worse, or possibly make it even better.
And a lot of things that we talk about in my first 5 years, especially for parents, is the idea that you can help and coach your children through how to manage emotions. And part of that is about acknowledging, I think, as a parent, that human beings are emotional creatures. And it's really society that's got us to suppress what is a very natural way of communicating. But also as parents to be brave enough, and you sometimes do have to be brave, to acknowledge that emotion in yourself and sometimes articulate that to your children. And even when that has to come in the form of an apology, where you say, okay, that I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done that, or that I was feeling like that when this happened and I am sorry, or even saying, I see how you are feeling, and sometimes when I feel like that, this is what I do. And again, I think there's lots of context in your writing that's dead simple, and you have to be, I know, having done bits of writing, you have to be really good at it to be really simple and effective. So sometimes people look at picture books and go, well, it's got less than 500 words in it, how hard can it be? And actually, to write a really good one is really good. And also from a writer's point of view, I know from my commissioning editor often talks about when people write more academic texts for teachers or adults, and they say, oh, I'd like to write a children's book. It's often referred to in-house as the ugly baby, that people who think they can write in one kind of genre always think that children's books are going to be an easier option. But actually, to write a really good children's book well is really difficult. And that's why I think yours are really accessible, and you just kind of hit the nail on the head.
It might be because I'm a big kid myself. So I take all the adult world and I turn it into child speak quite naturally and quite comfortably. But what you were saying there about emotions, it's funny because we're not generally taught to be very clever with emotions. I know as a parent, when my children had tantrums or kicked off or got angry, it would trigger emotions in me, and then my response wouldn't necessarily be the best it could possibly have been. And in actual fact, the best way we can make our children manage their own emotions and regulate better is for us to stay calm. And to do that, we have to acknowledge that we're having emotion in the first place, to manage it ourselves, and then just be this kind of earthing force for our children, where you're present, you're acknowledging the emotion, you're showing you understand the emotion, you don't panic about the emotion, and you help the child work out what they can do that might eventually sort out the situation or not. If the situation can't be sorted out, then help them ride that experience of that emotion. And then we develop really healthy approaches towards emotions arriving and leaving without any extra baggage attached to them.
And that can be really counterintuitive, can't it, as a parent? And again, that's because you carry the baggage of your childhood.
Don't be angry, don't be upset, child, and let me sort this out. But no, actually riding the emotion with the child by being a calm, constant presence teaches your child that emotions are not, you know, they are natural, they're part of being human. Let's not panic about it when an uncomfortable emotion arises.
And I think also, I know you've got a book that's due to be officially out. Is it this week? What makes me do the things I do? Yeah, which I'll be adding to my collection. But I read also in the brief around that there are pages in the back that are for parents. So there's 3 or 4 pages that parents can, well, I've got, obviously I think what you say is that there are books and books that have been written for parents about children's behaviour, but these are in the moment thought prompts that you might find useful.
Yes, I mean, obviously there's loads of books written about behaviour and how to manage children's behaviour. I think I wrote one for teachers years ago. I'd write it slightly differently now. That's the thing. I'm all, you know, as your knowledge grows and grows and grows. But this book's got, yes, it has got 3 pages in the back with just a few simple pointers. It's not really deep stuff. It's not the book. I could quite happily write a big grown-up book on the topic. But yes, this is more a tool for reflection for a parent and a child to sit down and think about their behaviour, and it will make the parent hopefully reflect as much as the child. The bit in the back is just, as I say, it's sort of I don't know, a cursory nod to here's a little bit of a few helpers, a few pointers. And the way this book's set out, just because I'm really not one who ever wants to tell people stuff. I always want to make suggestions. And so it's got things like, so it's got the potentially unhelpful behaviour on this side, like telling lies. And so it explores why we might be tempted to tell lies. And then on this side, it's got why being honest might be more helpful. So it does look at all those kind of, so losing your temper and staying calm. So why might we lose our temper, and why might it be better to stay calm? So that's the next book.
Great that it's not saying don't lose your temper or never lose your temper. It's about acknowledging the fact that sometimes this happens for a variety of reasons. And also that, I mean, again, from a parent point of view, the kind of cognitive development and that kind of higher order thinking skill around the fact that, you know, I was chatting to parents a little while ago saying again about lying, and my child has started to tell lies, and they were like, I can't believe my cherub of a child has started to lie. And like, well, that's really interesting, but also from a development point of view, it's fascinating because it shows really good cognitive development. You've got to be quite creative to be a lie, and a good lie has got really good creative development. I mean, maybe we shouldn't be celebrating children's lying, but from a kind of development point of view, it's progress. It shows that children are learning. And then, as you're saying, it's about saying, not that we never tell lies, but we don't want to encourage lying, but that idea of when you might lie, what you might do instead, and also the effect that that might have on other people. Because again, as a young child, you don't always think about that. You've just very much like in the moment, this is about me, and if it gets me out of something or into something and it's not a complete truth, then I'm not going to think about the ramifications. I'm just going to think about the now.
Yeah. So, and hopefully that's the journey it takes the child and the parent on together, you know, like, well, let's look at this. We're not saying we can't ever, you know, you might still lie, lies might slip out. And as you say, you know, cognitively, it's really is quite creative, and it makes sense if it's going to get you out of trouble. But it's just kind of a great discussion tool for saying, yeah, but why might it be better to be honest? And certainly in which situations is it really important to be honest? So it's all about the discussions that can happen between the child and the parent and carer with that book. And that's my idea always, that, you know, it's a kind of a prompt for really interesting chats between children and their parents.
I think the other thing that's worth mentioning in my little Molly Potter fanboy session is that they are read and read agains. So how I might read it and share it at 2 years old will be different at 3, and again at 4, and again at 5. And so it's not like a read once when your child has had a meltdown in Tesco's, you read this book. because I think the children that I've read them with genuinely enjoy them anyway. But also, as you're saying, as adults, we change our thoughts, especially as our children get older and their personalities emerge. But for children, they approach things in different ways. So they are books to revisit and revisit again, and the discussion just gets richer. And I think as an adult or as a parent, when you're coming to visit a second or third or fourth or 16th time, because you know where the book is going, it helps your thinking, so you can be a bit more creative in the questions that you ask. And it's not like The Third Degree, where if your child's told a lie, you're going to read the Molly Potter book and get the truth by the end.
Oh no, I hope not.
But it's just that idea of sharing, really.
And I think the fact that they're non-fiction, somebody once asked me, why don't I do it? Because there are some fantastic fiction books that give really good messages about emotions, behaviours, all kinds of, you know, really quite pertinent lessons, as it were. But the fact it's non-fiction is really good, because I can put more into a non-fiction book. When somebody writes a story, they have to sort of stick to the metaphor, and there's usually only one serious message behind it. But the mileage in my books, because they're non-fiction, I can pack loads of stuff into it. You know, like I say, each illustration can actually be a whole talking point and launch a massive discussion. Yeah.
Before you popped up, we were talking about, I was saying I'd used Let's Talk About When Someone Dies, probably about way back in 2018, 2019, somewhere around about that, in an intergenerational project that I was doing. But I used a range of books, and some of them were fiction books with beautiful illustrations, but the concept of death was quite abstract. So an emotion that was kept, and when I was working with, again, under fives, looking at that context, they loved some of those picture books. But when we got to the end, they didn't have any concept that it was anything to do with death. And actually, sometimes you just need to be able to say, this is what we're going to talk about, because, you know, it's one of the only certainties that we've got, or the only certainty that you've got in life is that you're going to die. And for lots of children, they will encounter, you know, death in their early childhood. So books that explore that well, whilst not making it something children are then frightened of, that, you know, everybody close to them is going to die. But that opens up a really healthy discussion, which means that we enable all sorts of strategies around when something does happen, then they are way more prepared to cope with it.
I'm a big believer in giving children information, obviously at a child age appropriate level, but taboos, I think, can do quite a lot of damage. I mean, the other book is the Let's Talk About the Birds and Bees books, which was again a taboo topic, and obviously it doesn't go really explicit or overboard. But when I worked in as a PSHE and sex and relationships advisor, it's the book I wished existed. That, again, because there's a lot of euphemism use, and I'd use books with children, they'd be more confused at the end than they were at the beginning. So I just thought, I'll write the book that I wish existed, which has got the facts in it, done in a sort of a gentle way. You can never please everyone with a book like that. There'll always be some saying you didn't go far enough, or there'll be some people saying you've gone too far. Yeah. So it's a sort of a compromise. And yeah, it's about breaking that taboo, because I think if you don't talk about these things, children are left, I mean, they pick up information from all other different sources, so they're left confused or with really unhealthy ideas about topics that are taboo and stay taboo. And it gives them the idea that adults don't talk about these topics. So who do I talk to about them if they get into difficulty when they're older, or if they're you know, worrying about their body, or, you know, even if they hit puberty really early and they don't know what's going on. So yes, I think giving children information, like you say, not so it worries them, not so they think, so with the death book, so they don't go around thinking everybody's going to die. I wrote that book as much with children in mind that were just curious about death, as much as children who might have been.
And they are. They're really curious about death. I mean, children on the whole tend to be, you know, really curious about anything. If you see a dead bird, or you've got the dead goldfish, or they are fascinated by that. I remember once working with some children that had been hatching some chicks at Easter time, and there were lots of 9 fluffy little chicks, and one that had died when it had come out of the egg. And the one that they were obsessed with in terms of wanting to know more and the high level of curiosity and interest was the dead one, because obviously it's something that's different. And again, we had a discussion then with the team of, do we just squirrel it away? And so they're coming to find that there is no...
Well, it's really interesting you just say that, because I just wrote a resource for an acquaintance who runs a company for hatching kits that go into schools. And I wrote for early years and Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, but Key Stage 1. And the part that I included in there was exactly a section about how to deal with the situation of one of the chicks either not hatching or dying. And it was all about making it, obviously it leaves it to the discretion of the adult that's leading it, but it was all about using it as an opportunity to explore death, because it's almost a perfect example of, you know, not so brutal and in your face, but to help children understand that things do die.
It's almost like, I think I once read it referred to as like secondary loss. So the idea that children can be aware of the death of something that they haven't necessarily got a strong attachment to, which helps to build the foundations for. And we've gone in a very maudlin direction in this conversation, but it's really, it's really important. I think also worth saying is, as a parent, always read the books that you buy for your children before you give them to your children, because even in picture books there can be things that you might be challenged by, and it's always good to have a heads up before you go into that space. But I think, also acknowledging that a lot of the way you feel about things like the birds and the bees or death will be how you were coached by your parents or family, and you carry a lot of that baggage with you. And sometimes it's about challenging that and thinking, well, actually, is this more about me and what this is stirring up in me, or is it about what's best for my child?
Exactly. I mean, because if you think about it, quite often if I've asked adults, you know, what was your sex relationships like, when education like when you were young, there's, you know, there might be one person in the room that says, oh no, actually I had really good education on that level, and it's usually down to the fact that they encountered one particularly, you know, open teacher that was prepared to answer questions and so on. So we're left with that feeling after terrible relationships and sex education like that, that it is something that is, you know, you just don't talk about it. So that can be quite stifling for children, especially if they're left confused or they're worried about something. So yes, again, that, you know, that's the taboo. I think we should give children information gently.
Absolutely, and I think it's, as you said, it's done in an age-appropriate way. And we also know that children are not linear in their development. So in terms of their emotional maturity, it depends on a whole host of things, like your attitude as a parent or a carer, if they've got older siblings, you know. So again, it's about reading books that you can interpret in a number of different ways, and what you get out of it at one point in your journey will be very different from what you get later on. Now, I know this could be a bit like saying, can you pick one of your favorite children? But have you got a favorite book, or is it always the one that's just about to be published, or because you've just finished all the edits on that one, is that the one you like the least until you can learn to love it again?
Oh yeah, I can't look at them straight away. That's always a mistake, because I go, oh, I wonder, oh, something slipped through the editing or something, and I can't do that. But the one I think, and I do think Sarah Jennings' illustrations have just got better and better. But the one that was my last one, maybe the next one will become my favourite again, like you say. I might be that fickle, but it's this one because of the illustrations as much as anything. I was really directive with the illustrations. Please, you know, put this here, do that there, draw this here. But it's packed with so much diversity, because it's all about exploring and celebrating how we can all be different. I think the illustrations, for every time I look at it, there's something new for me to spot. So yes, I think at the moment, they'll ask me again in a couple of weeks, and it will change. Yeah, so, probably that one.
So what makes me do the things that I do is it this week?
Thursday, yes, Thursday. I believe. Yes.
That's tomorrow.
Book day.
No.
Yes, oh, you did, isn't it? Yes. Oh, no, is it?
No,
2 days.
No, it's the after tomorrow.
Ask us things like that.
Are there more in the pipeline? Have you already got some that are written, that are in there in the process? Have you got a never-ending list of ideas?
Yeah, I never know whether I'm allowed to just say this, but there's the next book after What Makes Me Do the Things I Do is How Are You Feeling Now? So it's a sequel to How Are You Feeling Today? So it's a sequel in several senses, in that it's got slightly more sophisticated emotions in it, but it's the same format. So that's going to be out in 2023. And there's some other ideas, but they're all kind of in the pipeline. So yeah.
And they're top secret, and your editor will literally kill you if you mention
Yeah, I don't want to them, do I?
So, I mean, amazingly, we are now hurtling towards the very end of our half-hour chat. But if people want to find out more about you, your full collection of books, or even to find out how they could work with you, because you do a variety of different things, I know, around all sorts of things to do with all the things that we talked about today, where is best for them to look to find out more about Molly Potter?
It's quite simply www.mollypotter.com. Nearly missed a W then. And there's a blog post on there with which I blog quite regularly. It's got lots of advice for parents on things like emotional literacy, a bit of behaviour, relationship skills, and so on. So, and I enjoy writing that, in fact.
Great. So, and if parents want to get in touch, they can do that via
there's a contact form on there.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, literally, we're at the end of our time when we actually managed to get on in the first place. It has been an absolute pleasure. Honestly, I literally think we probably could have talked for another 2 hours. It would be great.
Yes,
at some point, yeah, you could come back and rejoin us and talk about where we're up to, and just so much that we could dive into. But if you haven't come across Molly's work before, then have a look online, have a look at Molly's blog, but certainly have a look at the books. They are a real positive addition to anybody's book box or library. And as we said, we'll give you a myriad of things to discuss with your children around some really pivotal key areas of child development that you can visit again and again and again. So thank you so much, Molly, for joining us, and hopefully we can connect again soon.
My pleasure, Alistair. It's been great.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.